Hello and welcome to the Wow Podcast. I'm your host, Darshawn McAway, and we have a special guest over the phone with us. We have Bethany James. She's the author of The Big Game. Bethany, how are you doing today?
I am so blessed. I'm doing really good. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into your book, I always like to ask any author, writer, or illustrator, what made you want to write books in general?
I believe writing is my purpose. It's really important to know that there's something for everyone to do. And for the longest time, it's the only thing I ever really been good at, specifically poetry. But I would say it's been something, that I've really just felt was my only gift.
Got you. So with that being said, tell me, why did you choose the title The Big Game, and what is your book about?
Okay, so I chose the title The Big Game to be totally real and just authentic because I was under management at that time for modeling, and they said, hey, the Super Bowl's on. I love your sport. There's a sport poetic literature I put in there. It's like a poem that it's a literature that's supposed to be kind of about sports. So they said if you want to get sales and attention, The Big Game would be the best title. So it wasn't anything deep. It was just something to kind of get me out there because I'm a new author.
Got you. So I'm curious about your poem, Escapism. I read through it about 2 or 3 times, and I wanted to know, at what point of your life, when you were writing that, where were you, what type of space were you in when you wrote Escapism?
Escapism is a very figurative kind of imagery type poem, and the space I was in, I really want to first stress, I want people to take my poetry very straightforward because I try to be very real. But I feel like that poem I was really trying to use imagery and use my words to paint the picture of escapism itself as it is. And I think my space was just, when do I feel escapism? Because I procrastinate, for example, when I work. So I was talking about when you study, books lose because you try to stay focused, but your mind escapes.
Right. So what is your hardest poem to write?
That's a good question. I would say the hardest one to write was Wedding Night, because Wedding Night is a song. I don't sing but I feel like my words are very song-like in that, and I was really trying to get that vibe of just what you would feel like on your first wedding night. So that was really hard because it had different pieces to it. You had to have the way you write it, the measures and everything had to be correct. So that was definitely hard to do.
So with that being said, when something's hard to do, what type of advice would you give to a person that wants to write poetry?
The only advice I could really give, because I could say something, deep, but it's, don't be afraid. Be yourself and just write.
What's the best thing about being a writer?
I think the best thing about being a writer, honestly, is being able to have a craft, perfect your craft, and cause a small ripple of positivity for the humanity, for the world. You're making your voice be heard. You don't know who needs to hear what you have to say. And writing is a tool. It's a craft. And if you're doing something you're supposed to do and you're writing about who you are and you're being real and transparent, I feel you're somebody that's making a difference.
Got you. So are you currently working on anything right now?
I love surprises. All I will say is I love surprises a lot. I don't want to give everything away. But if you look at the date on Amazon when I wrote The Big Game, Volume 1, Spirituality and Love, I wrote it about 2016. And since then, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with Volume 2. But Volume 2, the manuscript is made. I have decided to really just focus in on Christian fiction because let me explain. The Big Game was a mixed bag. And so my new book, it's in a contest. It's my serious stuff I've written for years. I combined it into Volume 2.
Gotcha. Okay, so with that being said, tell us where you could be found, your social media, your website.
Yes. You can find me on Instagram. I love Instagram the most. My usernames are Beth Agape, Heavenly Muse Magazine. I have one that's my master's ministry, which is my ministry for my poetry. And I have one that's that's good enough. That's 3 of them. And if you go to Beth Agape, all the links to my Instagram are there, which is BETHAGAPE. And then I'm also, if you click on my Instagram, it links to all my other social medias. Like you can find my YouTube, and if you reach out to me on Instagram, I'll give you anything you want, like my Facebook, anything. 'Cause I love to connect with people.
Excellent. Well, you're listening to the WOW Podcast. That's WOWPODCAST. Go to wowpodcast.shop. I'm your host, Darshawn McAway. Bethany James, it was a pleasure speaking to you. And I like to tell people this wonderful tip: live your life like it's your last.
Oh, thank you. I had such a good time.
Thank you.
The Big Game, Volume 1, Spirituality and Love. 1. Escapism. Weddings, not sex sells, something in the air, pleasure, sultry and sweaty. Life in young heaven, literally no more chains. Live it doesn't exist, never. Calmness stimulates, crave mind numbness, thoughtlessness, chaos rejected. Tested by nothing, tempted by sweet harmony, temper at bay, free. Just a specimen. War speed I let go. Jury and judge gone. Like a cold parade, longing yet stimulated, looking for warmth, none. Escape is freedom, ever searching for her blind, even though she don't last. Long to squeeze her, gone.